Hey guys, welcome back to K12 Kitchen episode 3. In today's episode, we will be doing lab 310, determining the rate of diffusion. So this lab requires kind of a lot of advanced prep. So we'll be doing the advanced prep right now, and then we'll come back for parts 1 and 2 a little bit later. The advanced prep requires you to make an agar cube. And to do this, you will need your agar cube kit, which looks like this. Inside this kit, there's a little plastic tray, a stirring rod, your agar in 2 separate bottles, and sodium hydroxide, which is going to make a really cool color change. You'll also need boiling water. So I have a kettle over here. Let's get that warmed up and get it started. And we're going to have to carefully pour boiling water. So I'm using a measuring cup that has a nice little pourer as well. So, before we begin, don't forget, safety goggles and materials on. And as soon as my water is warm, we can get started. So we will be taking boiling water as per the directions on the bag. We'll be taking boiling water and carefully pouring it into this plastic container. Sounds like my water's done. So let's pour some hot water into my measuring cup and open up my little container. So you'll want to pour boiling water in this container up to the neck of the container, which means all the way up to this little black line that I just drew. Carefully pour. That's probably good, up to the black line. And now use your stirring rod and stir until all that powder is dissolved. While you're doing this bottle, might as well do the second bottle as well, since we have the hot water ready. Open up this second bottle. Once again, I'm going to pour boiling water up to the neck of the bottle and stir till it's all dissolved. Need a little bit more. Once it's stirred, it should be kind of a brownish tan color, and it's going to smell kind of weird. And that's because agar is used as a food source for microscopic organisms like bacteria. So to bacteria, it smells good. To us, it kind of smells weird. Once we finish step 1, carefully filling our bottles and dissolving, next we have to add our 10% sodium hydroxide solution. We're going to add this 1 drop at a time, drop by drop, until the liquid turns a permanent bright pink color. We'll stir as it goes. It's approximately 10 to 30 drops. 6. So that was 7 drops. Not quite pink yet. There's 10 drops. We want it to stay that bright pink color. And you guys can see the difference in color as I drop more and more drops in. 12, 14, 15. That looks pretty pink. How about one more? Just in case. Pink versus that original yellow-brown color. Lastly, once you have your pink color and it stays pink, we'll gently pour all of this liquid, or almost all of this liquid, into the plastic mold. You want to fill it all the way up to the top, and then we're going to set our mold somewhere safe and to the side so it can set overnight. I have my molds leftover liquid in your bottle, that's okay. And then we'll let that sit for 12 to 24 hours. I'll go ahead and do the same with the second bottle, but you can go one at a time. And once that agar is set, we'll come back here for part 1 and 2 of our actual lab. So we'll put that aside, take a 12 to 24 hour break, and I'll see you guys back here in a little bit. Right, we are back here in part 1 and 2 after we did our advanced prep for our agar cubes. So here's my agar, it's all set and ready to go, and I've already taken it out of its plastic container and put it onto a plate and cut it up into 1, 2, and 2.5 centimeter cubes using my ruler. Remember, centimeters is the smaller part of the ruler, not the larger one. Also for part 1 and 2 of this lab, after you set up and cut your 2 sets of 3 cubes, you'll need vinegar, a styrofoam cup. You'll use the scalpel to cut your vinegar or your agar cubes, and a spoon. And as always, cover your workspace with paper towel or foil, and don't forget your safety equipment. So, after I've prepped my agar, the first thing I'm going to do is calculate surface area of the cubes I already have. So I'll follow the example data table in my student guide, and I'll fill in data table 1, 2, and 3 for cube 1, cube 2, and the cube that's 2.5 centimeters in size. Then, before I do anything more, I will also record my observations of how these agar cubes look right now before I do anything to them, add vinegar to them. So I'll fill in number 2 in my analysis questions on my lab as well. Alright, so let's get started with our cubes and the vinegar. To determine the rate of diffusion, these cubes are going to sit in vinegar for 5 minutes for part 1 or 10 minutes for part 2. So using the spoon, you'll gently pick up your cubes of 1 centimeter and put it in the cup. 2 centimeters, and here's my larger 2.5. And place them in the bottom of a cup, of the styrofoam cup. It doesn't matter if they're on top of each other or not, but into it as much as one layer as you can. Any leftover cubes you can discard in the sink. Next, I'm going to take my vinegar and cover my cubes with vinegar in the cup. As soon as I do that, I need to set a timer for 5 minutes for these cubes to sit in the vinegar for 5 minutes, so I'm just using my phone. So let's get that started and let it sit for 5 minutes. You might want to use the stir or the spoon again to gently stir the vinegar. Make sure it's covering all parts of the agar cube over the next 5 minutes. Otherwise, you can set that aside. Now I have one already sitting here that's been sitting for about 5 minutes. So I'm going to use my spoon and take them out. And I'm going to put them right here on this paper towel to dry them off a little bit. Now my cubes are not very solid, so they don't really look like cubes anymore. If your cubes didn't set, there's an alternative lab located in this lab section in your OLS where you can do this cube part of the lab virtually. Alright, so I'm going to take these guys out. That leftover vinegar in the styrofoam cup can be discarded. And I'm going to notice that something's changed with my cubes and some color has disappeared. So I'm going to take my ruler and measure as best I can the distance of clear to pink color on each of these cubes. On cube 1, on cube 2, and cube 2.5. Don't forget, I will always record my observations in data table 4 for my 5-minute part 1, and in data table 5 when I do a 10-minute version of the same thing. So data table 4 and data table 5, I fill out my measurements. Always use centimeters, smaller section on your ruler, and try to measure as best you can, even if your cubes are not super solid or super cube-like. All right. Lastly, to finish up group 1 and to finish up part 1, when I finished, I'll make sure to wrap all of these up in the paper towel. I can throw them away in the garbage and I can rinse everything else for cleanup. After I've cleaned up part 1, I'll go ahead and do part 2, which is exactly the same, except my agar cubes will be sitting in the vinegar cup for 10 minutes instead of 5. I'll fill in data table 5, and I will submit for points. If you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to email me at kspurgeon@insightpa.org, and happy labbing!